Hello, everyone. Today we will discuss interest groups, political parties, and elections. Again, this is an outline for the discussion for next 15-20 minutes. Interest groups, political parties, what's good, bad about them, and different aspects of elections. And these are learning outcomes for discussion for next few moments. Important thing is what interest groups do and how they try to influence public policy. For example, this group, Emily's List, tries to recruit women to run for office. And what they have political action committee, basically like a pile of money which allows them to donate to candidates they support. They try to invest to promising candidates early, making sure that they get some traction in the districts. And for many years, for like decades, they helped more and more women to be represented in US government. And the important thing, they do like training. They help female candidates to get some footing in fundraising and get to know other female candidates for office, so office holders. Again, clearly difference between political parties and interest groups. Interest groups, they want to influence public policy. They don't want to become government, to be in government. And in political parties, what they want to become government. They want to control branches of government so they can enact public policy they support. Important examples and different kinds of interest groups. The economic interest groups, which focus around economy, business groups like US Chamber of Commerce, labor groups like American Federation of Labor, agricultural groups like American Farmers Union, professional groups, American Medical Association, or for example, in my case, I'm a member of American Political Science Association and Midwest Political Science Association. And there are a bunch of non-economic groups which also try to influence public policy. Public interest groups, single issue groups, civil rights groups, ideological groups. There are like many kinds of those groups. There are different theories of interest groups formation. One theory was developed by Arthur Bentley, David Truman, and the idea is that if you have some kind of interest in society, that interest is able to organize somehow, and we have all kinds of groups which are represented in government, which voices are heard in government. And that theory was initiated, like first Bentley published his book, seminal book in 1908, and David Truman in 1950s. So it's a kind of old theory. More recently, in 60s, Mansur Olson, he criticized pluralist theory. He said that, well, there are lots of interests which are not represented in government. So what's up with that? And he indicated that only groups which are able to provide non-collective benefits can get resources to mobilize for action. But thing about rational choice theory, it does explain formation of economic groups for the most part, but it doesn't explain formation of non-economic groups, which we discussed like a moment ago. And neocorporatism, it's an idea, it's mostly for European countries. They have kind of symbiotic relations between interest groups and government. Some groups get like preferential treatment. and there is like exchange of power. For example, a particular interest group gets like preferential access to government, but in exchange, when this group decides to appoint like new leadership, they do it with consultations with the government. So it's kind of symbiotic relations. Not much of this neo-corporatism stuff exists in America. America is, I guess, closer to pluralist theory, but maybe not 100%. This would be learning outcomes for discussion for next couple of minutes. Why it's good in society to have those groups? Since there are many of them, and sometimes, in many cases, they have competing interests. We have multiple groups competing for influence, and there are not many cases when a particular group dominates a particular area of public policy. There are some, for example, US pharmaceutical policy, it kind of dominated by American pharmaceutical researchers and manufacturers, a trade group for pharmaceutical companies. They help to produce social capital. If you're involved with interest groups activities, you get new friends, you get new colleagues, which could help you to advance in life. They resolve collective action problems. Remember this free rider problem we discussed previously, when benefits of public policy are universal, everybody can get access to it, but some people just decide not to participate, which kind of discourages other people from participating. So interest groups usually help to address those problems. Economic groups, what they do, they provide non-collective benefits, and non-collective groups, they usually try to drive people's passions about issues. And in some cases, interest groups represent marginalized voices, which is actually true in American society. Some negative aspects of interest groups. Sometimes narrow influence could get too much advantage. Another thing is economic groups which have more resources, they have better access. It doesn't mean they have better policy outcomes. They always get what they want, but in terms of access, they do have more access than non-economic interest groups. And sometimes it creates this idea that, oh, everything is dominated by elites and we shouldn't be participating. Different tactics interest groups use. By the way, I'm teaching a Drexel interest groups and lobbying class. So if you want to spend more time on this, feel free to register for my interest groups and lobbying class. So one of the ways in which interest groups try to influence policy, they schedule meetings with members of Congress. And the way it happens, if you're a donor to a particular lawmaker, not everybody, but some lawmakers, they check who is the donor, how much they donated, and people who donated more, they get more access. Again, doesn't mean they just give you what you want, but at least you will have easier time scheduling meeting with a lawmaker. Interest groups write legislation. There have been funny studies using Turnitin, comparing text of legislation, which is promoted by interest groups publicly on their websites, and actual law. And sometimes verbatim it's the same. So sometimes interest groups, they just write legislation, and lawmakers, they just pass it. They do testimonies. Congress has committees on different areas of public policy, and in many cases, interest groups are invited to participate in those hearings and provide testimonies, which obviously sometimes influences public policy. But again, it's not a hard guarantee. For example, everybody have seen how lawmakers treated university presidents in America, how they treated social media companies. So it's not always a pleasant experience. Extremely important. Every like 4-8 years, there could be every 8 years, 100% new president, at least since FDR, and there is a transition committee which decides who is going to fill about like a couple of thousand political appointee positions, and interest groups have like lots of influence on who is going to serve in the next administration in political positions. And one of the ways to legally influence courts, for instance, is to provide amicus curiae briefs. It's when a member of the court says, okay, this organization is going to be a friend of the court, and despite not being like a side in the proceedings, an interest group can provide a legal argument saying why court should make a particular decision. Again, it's not hard influence. Let's say if we talk about Supreme Court, liberal judges tend to hear more to liberal interest groups. Conservative judges tend to listen more to conservative groups. So none of those methods are like hard methods. Important thing to see, over the years, we have seen an increase in lobbying spending from like just over 1 billion in 1998 to almost to more than like 4 billion in 2023. And this graph about number of lobbyists, it's a result of, I would say, demagoguery. It happened around 2008 when Barack Obama was elected president. And what he did, he said, I'm not going to employ lobbyists in my administration in political appointees positions. But what happened, lobbyists, they have lots of policy expertise. They know a lot about issues. So even he had to make specific waivers for particular people he did want to see in his administration. But overall trend of kind of demagoguery, I would say, when people say, oh, lobbyists are all bad, and politicians pick up on this stuff and even enact executive orders, try to bar lobbyists from serving in the administrations, resulted in decline in the number of registered lobbyists. So what happened? People just stopped registering. That's it. Outside lobbying, political organizing. When you help particular candidate to run for office, do like electoral help for the particular person. Grassroots lobbying, when you organize groups around particular issues and try to contact your lawmakers, letter writing campaigns, again, and this now happens in many ways. Initially, it was letter writing like 100 years ago or 150 years ago. Currently, letter writing campaigns, it's just a form you fill out somewhere, and groups which try to push a particular point of view on lawmakers, they just create on their website like specific forms you can fill out, and you can message your lawmaker. And think about this, every lawmaker in Washington, they have a person in staff whose like job is to review all those comments sent by constituencies, and they have like a weekly meeting with their boss and say, okay, this week your voters have been concerned about these issues, and if this lawmaker is in like tough election campaign, he actually might listen to those letter writing campaigns. So this lobbying tactic is actually effective sometimes. Ballot initiatives, direct democracy, when in a bunch of states in America, you can just make a policy change by referendum. But for that, you need a majority during election on that issue. Political action committees, it's a pile of money heavily regulated by a Federal Election Commission. They have rules on how you can spend it, how much you can donate. One of the ways candidates for offices get their money. And lastly, and I think most important one in current climate are super PACs. It's a pile of money, donations, which are anonymous. You have no way of knowing who donated. They're not like political action committees, which are transparent. They have to disclose their donors. You can look up the information in super PACs, and it's a result of Citizens United decision, which basically said all kinds of money can go to American politics, simply speaking. And this is the result of Citizens United decision by Supreme Court in 2010. After this, the amount of outside spending just exploded. At some point, for instance, it reached more than like $2 billion. And it's most of it is not very transparent. These are learning outcomes for discussion in the next few minutes. Difference, once again, difference between interest groups and political parties. Political parties want to be government. They want to get elected and actually control government. And in many cases, they do have ideology. So they raise money for campaigns. They try to register and make sure voters show up. And they participate in selecting candidates for running for office. But overall, in America, it's your decision to become participant in an election as a candidate. If you decide, okay, I want to get elected, let's say to, city council, it's your job to like get voters informed about you, to win in a primary in your party with which you identify, and then to win in a general election. So in America, the role of parties in like selected candidates and raising money for campaigns is kind of limited in comparison to other countries. Countries have different party systems. In the United States, because of this majoritarian system, when winner takes all, we have two-party system. There is like not many incentives for a third party to emerge. It's American political system. Its electoral system prevents it from happening. But in other countries like Germany, since they have proportional mixed system, some of it proportionate, some of it majoritarian. They have multi-party systems, and ruling coalitions are usually done with like a bunch of parties which decide, okay, we can co-govern. Let's divide cabinet positions and let's form a government. And in countries like Russia, China, North Korea, many countries, there's just one party. Well, in Russia, technically there are a bunch of different parties, but there's only one ruling party which control political system. And this is the stuff you will learn in the next few minutes. Thing is, in recent decades, we observe more candidate-centered campaigns when the focus is on people instead of party platforms. And not many people currently pay attention to party platforms, which are adopted during conventions. And even when people are elected, they don't pay much attention to party platforms, at least in the United States. A bunch of reasons why political parties overall became like more fractured and less influential. I would say communications are different. Since now you can engage with your candidate on social media, and they have like direct access to prospective voters. Class barriers become less prominent than before. It's more mixed now. Huge rise in populism when candidates knowingly promise voters stuff they just cannot deliver. And so people grow distrust in political parties. So they say stuff and they never deliver. A rise in corruption in many countries like Russia, China, etc. People don't trust political parties. Reliance on patronage. Patronage is a system when political boss occupies a particular position, let's say mayor office, and he or she controls operations of that office. He or she gives out important positions in government. For that, I would suggest to watch this movie, The Boss. It's about Chicago mayor. It's a bit exaggeration, but it resembles Chicago politics in 1960s when patronage was important. And in countries, in many Latin American countries, patronage is extremely important. For instance, Maduro, head of Venezuela, he relies on patronage to give out goods to generals, so they keep him in power despite protests from population. And these are learning outcomes for our talk in the next few minutes. Again, elections are specific procedures which allow people to influence who becomes official at the particular level, like head of state, head of region, member of parliament, stuff like this. Thing about elections, since they're periodic, everybody knows when they happen. In most cases, it's in constitution. Politicians have to run for re-elections. If like it depends on term limits. For instance, in the United States, the term limit is 2. Only you can run for 2 terms. That's it. And in America, presidents do have to listen to will of the people. For example, you can observe how Biden administration was trying to reach peace in the Middle East because they knew they're getting like hurt in states like Michigan, where Muslim population is kind of important voting bloc, and in countries like Russia, where President Putin can get like re-elected unlimited number of times. He can change constitution at any moment, and he did that. He doesn't care what Russians think about the war with Ukraine. And if politicians promise people particular things they want, in many cases they actually deliver. Like, for example, Barack Obama ran on the platform saying, "I will end Iraq war." And when he became president, he actually did it. And Trump, for example, he ran saying, I will cut taxes. When he was president, he did cut taxes for rich people. So if you're a rich person, okay, he did good for you. And let's say Biden, he said when he was running for office, I will end Afghanistan war, and he actually ended it. There are some issues with elections, obviously. Political elites, they have lots of influence on the media, so they can like change perceptions of particular issues by people. So you have to be careful like what you consume and where you consume stuff. Sometimes people don't implement the goals they announced before. Remember, I discussed populism a little bit. And in Republican states in this country, they try to suppress minorities, since minorities are more likely to vote for Democrats than for Republicans, again, on average. Okay, to be able to participate for elections, you need to be eligible, which in most cases means you should be a citizen of a particular country. For example, I'm a permanent resident. I'm not a citizen at the moment, so I cannot participate in election. Then, like in 5 years, when I become citizen, I can like go and register. And the tendency in this country is that older, wealthier, more educated white people show up more for elections than younger, less wealthy, less educated minorities. And as you can see, United States is kind of like in the middle in terms of voter participation, voter turnout. In Sweden, they do like their politicians, it looks like. And in UK, I guess it's like the same as in this country. And again, what I said a few moments ago, you can see that usually, not always, but usually, whites participate in elections more than non-whites. Okay, which things negatively affect voter turnout? Voter fatigue in this country, the constitution says every 2 years we have election. For example, in 2024, there will be a presidential election. There will be full membership of the House will be re-elected. Maybe some of them will retain their seats, some of them lose them, but full House is up for a vote. And 1/3 of the Senate will be re-elected. And also there will be a bunch of elections on state and local level. And in 2022, there have been, again, no presidential election, but election for the full House and election for 1/3 of the Senate. And again, a bunch of elections on state and local level. So when people vote and sometimes they don't see much difference in what's going around them, they could become like tired. Oh, what's the point of voting? But again, as I said many times before, politicians, at least on statewide offices, they hire pollsters to figure out which groups are more likely to show up in the place where like I'm running for office. So if they see you're not likely to show up, they're not going to care about your issues. Yeah, timing sometimes, but timing of elections have been mostly resolved since the pandemic. Most states have mail-in voting. And voter registration, they are different state by state, and they're kind of difficult for some people. declines in social capital. Sometimes people get like less involved, less interested in what's going on around them, and trust in government goes down, unfortunately. And this is a historic trend, how trust in government declined from like late 1950s to now. And again, it's a result of a few political scandals. As you can see in 70s, you have, you might guess, Watergate scandal. In like 1996, I would say maybe like all kinds of Clinton scandals, Monica Lewinsky scandal. So a bunch of big scandals which make America trust less in its government. And these are learning outcomes for our talk in the next couple of moments. Important thing to understand about American elections. In America, people vote within the electoral districts. And in terms of House elections, they're roughly the same in terms of like number of people, and it is decided as a result of census, which happens every 10 years, and it's in Constitution. After that, state legislatures, they control electoral maps in terms of the House. In terms of the Senate, electoral maps are set. It's like borders of state. And United States, thing I don't like about America, election of the president is not direct. First, there's this election of electors, and since small, less state with less population, they're kind of favored in the system. Like, for example, Delaware or Wyoming, states with like 600,000 people, they have 2 senators. And states like California with like, 40 million people, they still have 2 senators. So people in small states, they have more electoral representation in terms of electing president than people in large states. And these are basic principles how elections work around the world. So in the United States, there's a plurality rule, which means you have, for the most part, 2 candidates, and whoever gets more votes than the other candidate, that person wins. But in many countries, like in France, they have majority rule. You must win at 50%, or you have a runoff election. And in many countries in Europe, like in Germany, you have proportional system when number of people in the parliament represents roughly the proportion of people who voted for a particular party during an election. But in this country, many states have their own rules about elections. So in Georgia, they have this runoff system. If nobody gets a majority, then you have to do a runoff election. Important thing about American elections, federal regulations of elections are very lax. They mostly concern finances, and most of the laws which regulate elections, administration of elections, are by constitution on state level. And thing to understand, direct democracy is very important. It could be done in a couple of ways. In this country, ballot initiatives, you can vote on a particular change in public policy initiated by a ballot initiative. And sometimes in some states, they have a recall process. For example, in California, they have a recall process, and office holder could be recalled by voters. For example, a few years ago, Governor Newsom had a recall initiative, and but he was able to defeat it. As I said before, states are run by elections are run by states, and they have local state rules about administration of elections. And federal oversight, again, campaign finances, but remember about Supreme Court decision Citizens United, which basically allowed unlimited amount of money in election. And they do try to address issue of access. Remember Civil Rights Act of 1964, which tried to make sure that minorities are not restricted in their voting in this country. And difference about electoral systems in many other countries, they're more flexible. For example, in parliamentary systems, if you have a vote of no confidence, you can have a new election. Like, for example, this year in 2024, Rishi Sunak, head of Conservative Party in UK, he announced new election because he was not sure he's able to govern the country, and he was defeated. Or in 2024, another example would be French President Emmanuel Macron. He announced new parliamentary election after conservative bloc got kind of sizable representation in European Parliament. So he thought, okay, let's do an election to French Parliament to make sure, like, can we run this country? And in 2024, coalition, like center-left coalition, was able to defeat right-wing politicians in France as a result of the snap election in France in 2024. Thank you very much.